Om Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsa Chanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. So namaste everybody, and welcome back to the Bhagavad Gita class. Can you all hear me clearly? Yes. All right. We are on the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And here in the 26th and 27th verses, some very powerful practices of bhakti were given, devotion, love of God. 26th verse said, Krishna is saying, worship me, and how simple and effective and powerful the worship of Krishna is. He says, patram pushpam phalam toyam, leaves, flowers, just water, fruits. It's Shivaratri tomorrow, so this is... that's how you worship Shiva, for example. And one of the names of Shiva is Ashutosha. Ashutosha is the one who is easily pleased. Ashutosha, easily pleased. It doesn't take a lot to please Shiva. And so he says the worship of God is very simple. The offerings themselves are not expensive, nor are they complicated, nor is the process complicated, but what is necessary is love. What is necessary is devotion, reverence, love. A pull towards God. I was reading Vivekananda says, the old rule applies here in spirituality as everywhere. You get what you want. And then he says, it is not as easy to want spirituality as one might think. It's easy to want the world, to things in the world, but it's not all that easy to want spirituality. Why not? Because it's sort of the reverse. One has to stop that, and then only this want for God increases. The two do not go together. Because it's the same force basically. If it flows out to the world, then that much less desire will be there for God. In fact, God, spirituality in any form, does not seem real as long as there is a tremendous attraction to the world. So he says devotion. With devotion, even the smallest of offerings, even the simplest of offerings. And Krishna says, I accept these offerings. This is one powerful way of devotion. What is that way? What is called dravya tyaga. You offer things to God in worship. Even more pervasive, a larger, more powerful way, the 27th, to dedicate whatever we are doing to God. So not just a specific worship, but just whatever we are doing, and it can be done. That erases the difference, the gap we make between spiritual life and secular life. So this is spiritual, but what I do outside is secular. Meditation is spiritual, but reading a book or talking with somebody else is secular. No. It says whatever we do in this world, whether we consider it religious or we consider it secular, all of it can be spiritualized. They're not automatically spiritual, but can be spiritualized. How? 27th verse. Yat karoshi, whatever you do. What do we do? And he gives the divisions of that, the classification of what we do. Yad ashnasi, whatever we consume, literally what we eat, but also what we see with our eyes, what we hear, what we smell, taste, touch, whatever things we buy from the world, consume from the world, all of that. He says, you madarpanam, tat kurushva madarpanam, you offer it, you do that as an offering to me. So whatever we consume in the world, we offer to God. And the rule is to offer to God before consuming. Right? So I've seen many devotees, monks, spiritual practitioners eating. So eating is something that we do all the time, eating and drinking. So make a little habit of, just for a few seconds, before we eat or drink, offer it to God, and it becomes prasada, the offered food, the sacred food. So food, drink, mentally offer it, and then take it. And it becomes a lifelong practice. It's a powerful practice because you're going to eat anyway. Yadashnasi, so whatever you consume, that you consume as an offering to me. Yad juhoshi. All the juhoshi literally means whatever we give in sacrificial offering. It's a reference to the Vedic worship, the kind of religion which was common at that time. So they would light a sacrificial fire with the accompaniment of Vedic mantras. Offerings would be put in the fire. But basically every religious action, do you do a puja? Do you kneel down and pray? Do you give offerings at the temple, church, mosque, whatever you do? Any kind of religious activity that we do, he says you can offer it to God. We do generally, but make it that it is an offering to God. That attitude. Then dadasi, whatever you give in charity, it could be money, it could be your time and effort and energy, it could just be a good turn to somebody. Just go out of your way, volunteer somewhere, help somebody, or it could just be the effort it takes to be nice to somebody, especially when you're not feeling like being nice. So whatever you give, and of course it means money, property, whatever you give, all of that mentally, internally, you give to me. Whatever you're doing in the world, that goes on. Internally, the attitude is that I am giving to Krishna, I am giving to God, in whichever form you worship God. Yat tapasyasi, whatever spiritual practices we undertake, repeating a mantra, fasting, which Shivaratri many will do fasting. So the fasting, all of that is again an offering to me. So whatever we do, he has divided it into 4 categories. Whatever we consume, whatever we give, whatever religious activities we perform, and whatever, like self-control, self-improvement, all the activities that we perform to, deliberately control our body and mind. All of that, tat kurushva madarpanam. Yes. Now, these are the 2 powerful practices he has given. Now we'll go ahead. 28th verse I had mentioned last time. We'll start from there. What is the result of these practices? The 28th verse was, let's just repeat it again. Shubha Shubha Phalairevam Shubha Shubha Phalairevam Moksha Se Karma Bandhanai Moksha Se Karma Bandhanai Sannyasa Yoga Yuktatma Sannyasa Yoga Yuktatma Vimukto Mamupaishyasi Vimukto Mamupaishyasi. You will get rid of the bond of karma, bondage of karma. You will be free of the bondage of karma. Basically, you will attain liberation, moksha, mukti. Being freed of whatever is good and evil, auspicious and inauspicious, shubha, ashubha. Now, this Shubha and Ashubha, there's something to be understood here. Shubha and Ashubha, these are words which are common in most Indian languages. Is Sanskrit, of course. Shubha means which is a good, which is auspicious. Some activity, some language, some time, some day, some space, some place. These are Shubha. And some are inauspicious, some are not good. However, there's a lot to understand here, From the perspective of karma, in which perspective this is said, the usual understanding of good and bad, auspicious, inauspicious, from the perspective of karma is this. The law of karma, that if we are deliberately what we do is good, dharmic, dharma, then the result is it generates a merit called punya. And that merit ultimately gives rise to something pleasant, something good, something nice in our lives, material benefits. In Sanskrit, sukha, pleasure, happiness. So this is basically the law of karma. You do the good, it generates merit, and that merit generates something pleasant in our lives. Dharma, punya, sukha. If we deliberately are naughty, adharma, if I do something deliberately, I know it to be wrong, and I do it, adharma leads to pāpa, which is demerit, and that leads to dukkha, suffering. So adharma, pāpa, dukkha is suffering. So the first part of it, Vivekananda summarized it even more powerfully. Good, good, bad, bad, and none escape the law. Now that good, good, that part is called Shubha. And the bad, bad, that part, the adharma, sinful activities leading to suffering, is called Ashubha. And here Krishna says, get rid of both. Shubha, Ashubha, be free yourself from both. Why both? We understand. Nobody wants to be unhappy. And so if you don't want to be unhappy, don't do bad karma. Don't be adharmic. There's a saying that nobody wants to do dharma, but they want the result of dharma. That is sukha, happiness. Nobody wants to be unhappy. And nobody wants to be unhappy, but they want to do the adharma which leads to unhappiness. So, Shubha, Ashubha. Shubha is good karma leading to good results. Ashubha is evil karma leading to bad results, unpleasant results. And Krishna says, give up both. Vivekananda explains, chains, though of gold, are not less strong to bind. Then off with them both, sannyasi bold, say Om Tat Sat Om. So chains made of gold are not less strong to bind. Chains made of iron can bind us. The chains made of gold also bind us. How do they do that? So the understanding in Vedanta, in all of Hinduism, in all of Buddhism, Jainism, all the Indian paradigms of spirituality is that we are all bound by causality. Causality simply is cause gives rise to effect. Actions have consequences. And we are bound by that. So what we are experiencing now is the consequence of our past lives. What we are now is what we have built in ancient lifetimes. And what we are doing now goes to build what we will be in future. But this is not spirituality. This is worldliness. This worldliness and next worldliness. This is bondage. This is not particularly wise or spiritual. In fact, all of spirituality is trying to go beyond karma, beyond causality. This is one way of understanding spirituality in a philosophical way, is to go beyond causality. Within causality is bondage. What is bondage? It is being bound by law. You're strictly determined, and there's no freedom here. So the goal of spirituality is to attain freedom. That means to go beyond karma. When we talk about karma and the law of karma, I find so many people are fascinated. In fact, on YouTube, I think our IT team, they clipped out one part of some talk. It was on karma, and they just put that part, and that's like one of the highest viewed clips ever. But that was not my point at all. My point is to go beyond that. People are fascinated by that. Why? It's because we are fascinated by the contents of our lives. Our problems especially. Our hopes, desires, and our problems, how to solve them, and our hopes, how to satisfy, how to fulfill our hopes. You might think you're looking quizzical, puzzled. What's wrong with that? That is the very nature of bondage. These are two kinds of religion. One is the conventional kind of religion, which helps us, which tells us that you can rearrange your life to your liking. So the more of the pleasant, less of the unpleasant. So that is conventional religion. In Vedanta, this is called pravritti lakshana dharma. That is the preliminary part of the Vedas, the ritualistic part of the Vedas. And if that sounds too archaic, it's always there. You just look around. When you go to a church or a temple, the majority of people who are going there, what are they going there for? Liberation, enlightenment, to become a Buddha? No. Far from it. Now, they are going there because we have this life, and we are rightly so concerned with this life. We have many problems and many desires and hopes. Now, there's one way of tackling them in this world, and we don't see any way of really overcoming many of those problems and really no much hope of attaining all those desires that I have in my mind. I remember when our first class in economics was defined as the science of satisfying unlimited human wants with limited resources. That's the first thing you learn in economics class. And obviously you can't do it. It's not possible. Now religion takes up from there. Since you can't do it, here's a magical way of doing it. Here is God, and if you pray and if you give these offerings and if you are a good person, maybe, just maybe, God is going to magically reorder our lives according to our liking. Maybe. And it does work sometimes. Why does it work? Is it coincidence? No, I firmly believe it does work. God wants it to work also, so that our faith in God increases. Well, then why doesn't it work all the time? Why doesn't God make everything perfect? Make us perfect, make our lives perfect as we want it to be? Because it cannot be done. Because it would trap us in samsara, and samsara is never perfect by definition. That was the deep insight. The first thing that the Buddha discovered. Sarvam dukkham. The first noble truth. Why is everything sorrow? Because that's the very nature of samsara. Samsara cannot be made perfect. There is perfection available. In enlightenment, God realization, moksha, mukti, nirvana, whatever you call it, salvation, all religions say that there is a perfection possible. There is an escape beyond causality, beyond samsara. There is an attainment, what we want, what we really truly want, fulfillment, that's possible. But not where you're looking. Not in the contents of your life. One Swami put it very roughly but precisely. Somebody had come with problems, sorrow and suffering in samsara. And the Swami shouted at this person, I am not interested in your problems. How harsh, how unkind. Not interested in your problems. I'm interested in you. Immediately opens up a gap between I and my problems. I am not my problems. My problems do not define me. I'm interested in you. I'm not interested in your problems. Vedanta is interested in you. Vedanta is not interested in your samsara. In fact, Vedanta wants to get rid of your samsara. Which is why both the good karma and bad karma needs to go. Shubha, Shubha, Phalai. With the auspicious, inauspicious. The good and the bad, both the golden chain and the iron chain. What does it mean, golden chain and iron chain? It just means good and bad karma gives rise to continued limited existence. I have this birth, this life, it will end very soon. Don't look surprised. It's going to end very soon for all of us. Some of you in 75, 80, 90, 100 years maybe. Some of us within a short time. It will end. But it doesn't end there. Our life goes on. Nobody is... physical death is not the end of life. So life goes on and we will have further lives. Are they random? No, they're produced by causality, cause and effect. The causation which we have built up over many lifetimes, that produces life after life after life. Some of them very pleasant, nice, but all too brief and over, and some of them very unpleasant. They're also brief, but they seem very long because they're unpleasant. So this is golden chain, iron chain, and both we have to get rid of. That's what Krishna is saying. Overcome, get rid of good and bad karma. How do you do that? There are different ways. The bhakta will say, by the devotee of the Lord, by love of God, by the grace of God, our karma is wiped out. Presidential pardon for all. So it's, by the grace, it's all wiped out. That's one. Or by the way of non-dual knowledge. You realize you are Brahman, ever free. You always were free of causality. You are this infinite existence, consciousness, bliss. You realize this and you see it's a fact. So you are free of it. No matter who the villain is, no matter who the hero is, no matter whatever people have done, if it's a movie, the screen has no problem with anything at all. The movie screen on which the hero and the villain are appearing and doing terrible things and good things, neither touches the screen. So that is the way of getting over. This is called karma. From the karma's perspective, Shubha and Ashubha means good karma leading to pleasant life, bad karma leading to unpleasant life. This is what is meant by Shubha, Ashubha, auspicious, inauspicious. From a bhakti perspective, devotional perspective, what is Shubha and Ashubha? Shubha, good, and Ashubha, evil or bad. From a devotional perspective, it's not that which gives rise to pleasant consequences. I do dharma and there are pleasant consequences. No. If there are pleasant consequences, I will forget my beloved Lord. Sometimes unpleasant consequences remind me of the Lord. But then the problem is, if you are a devotee, if you are a saint, there won't be unpleasant consequences for you because you are really a very good boy or girl. So, Kunti, the mother of the Pandavas, at the end of the Mahabharata war, she prays to Krishna that let me be born again and again, even in suffering, so that I remember you, that I do not forget you. So she's not really worried about the pleasant and unpleasant consequences and what will come in life, in future lives. No, I just want to remember you. As long as God is in my mind, as long as my mind, my lips repeat the holy names of God, the mantra of God, as long as these hands are engaged in the service of God, that is Shubha for me. That is auspicious for me. Even the most pleasant of occasions, if I forget God, if I get engaged in samsara, that is inauspicious for me. Although from the perspective of someone outside, it might be very, very nice and very pleasant. No. So from a bhakta's perspective, love of God, remembrance of God, that day is a good day when I take the name of Krishna or take the name of Hari, Shiva. That day is unpleasant when I'm so happy and engaged with the world that I forget God. There's a very touching story which I heard recently from Swami Chetananandaji. Gopalerma, the old widow who spent all her life repeating the mantra of the baby Krishna and had visions of Krishna and so on. And Sri Ramakrishna thought very highly of her spirituality. So later on, long time after Sri Ramakrishna had passed, so she continued her life like that. And many of the devotees would supply things for us, what she needed. She wouldn't accept anything. Somebody realized that she lived in this tiny little room. Somebody realized that she was being troubled by mosquitoes. So they offered her a mosquito curtain, a mosquito net. Here, many of you don't know, but if you have been in India, you know what is a mosquito net. And you better have one there. So they offered her one. And that night, when she put it up nicely, this nice new mosquito net, and she went inside it and lay down to sleep, she was worried by thinking that maybe the rats might come and bite into the mosquito net, this fine mosquito net, and make a hole in it. She was worried about it. The rats might chew on it. Next morning, early in the morning, she packed up the mosquito net and arrived at the place of the devotee who had offered it to her, and said, "Here, I bought it back for you. Take back your mosquito net. I forgot. I did not think of Gopal, baby Krishna, last night. I kept on thinking of the mosquito net. Return, take it back." So, no, I don't want anything into samsara, including pleasant things, comfortable things, which make me forget God. One monk said very touchingly, he was saying that brahmacharis are the novices, monastic novices. I'll tell you in Hindi, it will be easier for me to translate. He said, आजकल के ब्रह्मचारी तो सुविधा ढूंढते हैं. These days, novices, monastic novices, they keep looking for comfort. सोचते हैं सुविधा होगी तो तपस्या होगा. So once I get some measure of comfort, I shall practice spiritual disciplines, meditation and whatnot. And then he said, with a touch of pathos, he said, "Bolo, suvidha mein kabhi tapasya hota hai." Tell me, is it possible to practice spiritual austerities, tapasya, when in the midst of comfort? Because the very desire for spirituality will become milder and will evaporate when you're in the midst of comfort. That explains why in old times, whether it is the monks in India, in the mountains and forests of India, or the desert fathers in the deserts of Egypt just after the time of the Christ, or the monks, spiritual seekers, hermits, why did they actively seek out difficult lives, isolated lives, lives of which we would consider unpleasant or very difficult? One reason is this: deliberately. So devotee, That's the devotee's attitude. What is Shuba and what is Ashuba? Then there is the Gyanis attitude. The Gyani, the enlightened one, the person who realizes what is Brahman. It's like this. How does the Gyani, the enlightened one, overcome the pleasant and the unpleasant? So the classic example of seeing a snake in a rope, the Buddhist, not the Buddhist, the Vedantic idea of seeing a snake in a rope. Example. So the rope by mistake is seen as a snake. Just like that, there is only one existence consciousness place, Brahman, and that is experienced as this objective world and as this individual subjectivity. So that is the snake. But actually the whole example is like this. In the semi-darkness there was this rope, but nobody knew it was a rope. Someone said it's a snake. Someone else took a look and said, no, it's a garland discarded from the temple. After the worship has been done, this garland has been offered to the deity, and afterwards someone has tossed it away. It's a garland. And the enlightened one says, oh no, it's not a snake, it's not a garland, it's a rope. Now, Shubha, Ashubha, auspicious, inauspicious. The snake is inauspicious. The garland is auspicious. But there's one thing common to both. Both are not real. The rope is actually real. Similarly, what we think to be auspicious, what we think to be inauspicious, what we think to be good, what we think to be evil, they are appearances. There is a reality which is deeper than both. The enlightened one sees that. A little more about Shubha Ashubha before we go on. There's another way of analyzing this. In Vedanta, we talk about 4 categories of people. The Pamara, the Vishayi, the Sadhaka, and the Siddha. The Pamara, the Sanskrit word Pamara means a person who leads an instinctive life. Literally it means the uncultured, the low. It means an instinctive life. I do exactly what I want just now. Now, it's all right if you're a little kid, very little kid, not too. But if you're grown up, that's now no way of living. So the person who is instinctive just wants pleasure and maybe wealth, artha and kama. Kama, pleasure. Whatever, if I find pleasing, I must have it now. And some people are just like that. Somebody who is an alcoholic or drug addict is trapped by addiction. My pleasure is all that matters to me. Some are pleasure and success in this world. As long as the IRS or the cops don't catch me, I'm fine. I'm not interested in spirituality or religion or whatever. So for this person, Shubha and Ashubha. What is Ashubha? What is inauspicious? Any kind of, morality, philosophy, spirituality, completely inauspicious. And what is auspicious? Go out there and have fun, an opportunity to make money illegally, what is called a quick buck. That is auspicious. And partying. And so that's auspicious. Shubha, Ashubha, good and bad. The next level is the Vishayi. Vishayi means a worldly person, but who understands that this kind of life, instinctive life, does not lead to happiness. It's not sustainable. Very soon it leads to misery. So, I still want success in this world, but I realize that I have to be a decent person to be successful in this world. So, this person bases his or her seeking of pleasure and success in the world, artha and kama, on the basis of dharma. The first person, the Pamara, wants only artha and kama. Artha means money, success, wealth, prosperity, and kama, pleasure. That's all. But this next person, the Vishayi, wants artha and kama on the basis of dharma, on the basis of morality. And most people are like that. I mean, if you dismiss the fancy Sanskrit terms, it just means what you would call a good person trying to make his or her way in the world. All of us, almost all of us, we have standards of morality. We think of ourselves as good people, and there are things that we would not descend to do. So, dharma, there is a moral basis, a kind of limits of decency which we do not exceed, and we pursue our worldly goals. Now, what would be Shubha and Ashubha for such a person? You can think. Good and evil. So, yes, misfortune in this world is evil. If I lose money on Wall Street, or if the menu doesn't consist of the things which I love most, that's evil for me. But also, if I'm sinful, if I break the law, if I do something that makes me feel guilty, that's evil for me also. So such a person wants to be within the limits of morality, wants to be a moral person, a good person, also a rich person, a happy person in this world. So Shuba Ashuba changes sharply when you go from the first level to the next level. Then comes the third level, the spiritual seeker. This person may be in the world, may be a monk, may be in the world also. However, the world is no longer the goal of such a person. The goal of such a person is enlightenment, God realization. And you might say that might be rare. No, actually, many people, just by the fact that you turn up for discussion on spirituality, on meditation, philosophy, it already shows that force working within us. Yes. So our goal now becomes moksha. Moksha, enlightenment, liberation, freedom. And dharma, artha, kama are no longer our goals. So the dharma that we practice is what is called nishkama dharma. Nishkama dharma means without worldly desire. The other kind of dharma which was practiced with worldly desire was that, which leads to that golden chain, which leads to good results. I'm doing good so that my life is good, my pleasant life. No longer that kind of dharma. Now the dharma that we practice, we do good because it is good to be good. It purifies me, makes me a more moral, a better person, so that I can reach for my spiritual goals. One can be good and not particularly spiritual, but one cannot be spiritual and not good. So this person, the third, the sadhaka, spiritual practitioner, spiritual seeker, is now reaching for God realization. And again think, Shuba Ashuba will change for this person. What is good and bad. So for this person, it's no longer, certainly no longer worldly prosperity or failure. That's no longer the calculus, not standard. Not even just morality. It is my spiritual endeavors, my spiritual practice, my devotion, my knowledge, my meditation. If that goes well, that is good for me. If that doesn't go well, that's not good for me. So the whole calculus changes. And finally you get to the siddha, the fully enlightened one, where again the person does not want dharma, artha, kama, moksha, because that person has already attained moksha, has attained liberation, the enlightened one. But the enlightened one, what is Shuba Ashuba? Goes beyond both. This is what Krishna is saying. Shubha Ashubhair phalaireva mokshase karma bandhaneir. So this description of Shubha and Ashubha, these are so much there to be discussed. You might think I'm spending too much time on this. Actually, no. All of what I said was from a sadhu in Uttarakhand. And he was discussing it in the context of sthita prajna. In the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna answers this question about what is it like to be enlightened, the second thing he says is, the third thing he says is, ya sarvatra anabhisneya tat tat prapya shubha shubham. Who the enlightened one has no attachment, does not react when Shubha and Ashubha come. And there this monk described the whole range of what is Shubha and Ashubha. So I just sort of borrowed it from there and put it here. When you do this, what happens? Mokshasi, you're free. Free of what? Karma bandhane, free of the bondage of karma. What's the bondage of karma? The golden chain and the iron chain. The bondage of causality. You are free. The body is never free. You as the Atman, as pure consciousness, you are free. And what do we have to do for this? Sannyasa yoga yuktatma. So endowed with the yoga of renunciation. What is the yoga of renunciation? That's not one I have come across. I've come across anger and hot yoga and Vikram yoga and what else? Kundalini yoga but I haven't come across this yoga of renunciation. What does it mean? Here the commentator, I'm taking Sridhar Swami's commentary. Sannyasi yoga yuktatma, sannyasa karmana madarpanam, saeva yoga tena yukta. Sannyasa means giving up. Renunciation. Renunciation of what? That's a big question. Because it's a very delicate question also. Because remember, right here, what is the situation? Arjuna is just about to give up this battle. He is ready. He just needs a little push from Krishna or a little okay from Krishna. You're on the right track. He's about to run away from the battlefield and become a monk or something. But Krishna says here, renunciation, giving up, sannyasa, renunciation, means to continue to do what you are doing and give up the results to God, offer them to God. He says, madarpanam, exactly what was said in the 27th verse, the verse before this. That practice, he says, that is giving up. That is the renunciation of karma. The renunciation of karma is to not stop doing action, not to withdraw from everything, but to keep on doing it, but mentally offer everything to God. That I am doing it for you, my Lord. And he says, this practice is yoga. So that giving up is the renunciation, sannyasa, and the practice, this particular practice to continue to do that, this is yoga. And the person who does this will attain me. Will attain me means, again, from the devotional perspective, there is Vishnu or Krishna, and in heaven, Vaikuntha, Goloka, the Vaishnava conception of heaven. After death, the devotee, the lover of Krishna, goes there and stays there in the presence of God. That's one way. The other way, the Gyanis, from the enlightened persons, from the person on the path of Advaita Vedanta, is the realization of our true nature. Swami Vivekananda uses a very interesting language. He says, that God realization, or what amounts to the same thing, self-realization. Very carefully worded. It's not that they are exactly the same, but what amounts to the same thing. It leads to the same result. Then, 29th verse. Samohaṃ sarvabhūteṣu, samohaṃ sarvabhūteṣu, na me dveṣyosti na priyaḥ, na me dveṣyosti na priyaḥ, ye bhajanti mayi bhaktyā, ye bhajanti mayi bhaktyā, mayi teṣu cāpyaham, mayi teṣu cāpyaham. I am the same to all beings. There is no one hateful or dear to me, but they who worship me with devotion are in me, and I am also in them. So in the introduction to this verse, the commentator, Sridhar Swami, says, so you give moksha, liberation, going beyond causality. You take up the iron chain and the golden chain for your devotees. That's what you have said. Krishna said, yes. And then the commentator asks, in that case, those who are not your devotees may not be interested in religion, or may not be interested in God or devotion to God. So aren't you partial? Aren't you being partial? Aren't you offering, you love me and I will give you freedom. Don't love me. So it's a very needy kind of God. Yeah. Isn't this what vaisham? Isn't this partiality? And if they love you, then only you will give moksha. If they don't love you, then you don't give moksha. Then in answer to that, Krishna says, no. I am exactly the same to everybody. The difference does not lie in me or my attitude to anybody. I offered myself equally to everybody. I offered moksha, liberation, equally to everybody. All the time. The doors of heaven are always open. But there's a difference in those who walk in and those who don't. As Vivekananda said, as always, it depends on what we want. You will get what you want. And it's not so easy to want spirituality. That's Vivekananda said this. Krishna is saying that. I am exactly the same to everybody. Ye bhajanti mayi bhaktya. Those who love me and worship me with devotion, they come to me. I am in them and they are in me. So they become one with me, let's put it that way. Or if you are a devotee, you attain to the heaven of religion or spirituality. So here the commentator Shankaracharya and the commentator Sridhar Swami, they use the example of fire. Fire, Shankaracharya also says, and this commentator also says that, just as fire equally gives heat to everybody, but in order to benefit from it, you must come near it. You must come near it and warm yourself with the heat of the fire. So you must turn towards it. You must not go away from it. And then blame fire. Why are you giving a warmth to the person who is huddled close to you, and I who am so far away from you, why are you partial? You're not giving me warmth. Well, come close. But then you have to come away from the dark, which is samsara. Come closer to the light. So here he says, Yatha agnehe swasevakeshu eva. Those who resort to fire. Tamaha shitadi dukkham kurvato api na vaishamyam. Tamaha, darkness. Shita, cold. Fire removes darkness and cold for those who resort to fire, not for those who do not. And you cannot accuse fire of being partial. Tathaiva, exactly in that way. Those who resort to God, those who come close to God, for them. So the original charge, in Sanskrit, the commentator had said, Yadi bhaktebhya eva moksham dadasi na bhaktebhya tarhi tathapi kim raga dveṣyadi kritam vaishamyam asti. So, if only for devotees you offer moksha, you do not offer moksha, liberation, for those who are not your devotees, isn't there likes and dislikes? There's an impartiality caused in you because you like some. They like you, therefore you like them. And there are those who do not like you, therefore you don't like them. So isn't it partiality? And his answer is there's no partiality here. And then he goes further. Dramatic statement. Now he's going to talk about the power of devotion, love of God. 30th verse. Api chet sudurācāro bhajate ananyabhāk sādhureva samantavyaḥ samyag vyavasito hisa. Even if a very wicked person worships me to the exclusion of anybody else, he should be regarded as righteous, for he has rightly resolved. So he says, sudurācāro, a person who is actually immoral, wicked, doing evil things, suddenly turns, what we say in the United States, finds religion, finds God, becomes religious, spiritual. He or she should be considered as a sadhu, as a good person, as moral person, even a saintly person. We immediately recoil. Why? Just because he loves God, I have to think of this person as a good person? He says, not because this person has become a good person just by loving God. It's because this person has rightly resolved. Rightly resolved. And we'll see what will happen because of the right resolve later on. We'll see in the next verse. But he makes a very big claim for the power of devotion. But he makes it very clear. Bhajate ananyabhāk, truly devoted, not just lip service. I found God, now all my debts have to be forgiven, and I've been nasty to you, you have to forgive me because I'm now religious. No. Such a person even will not seek forgiveness from others. He'll just hold on to God deeply. And that is so transformative. Very soon this person becomes a holy person, a spiritual person. Girish Ghosh is a classic example. He was a drunkard and given to all sorts of immorality. Sri Ramakrishna loved him so much, and people were upset with him because he's a man of loose character. Why does Sri Ramakrishna allow him to come close? Often Sri Ramakrishna could not stand people of loose character, those who were liars and so on, cheats. But Girish Ghosh, he loved and encouraged so much. Why? There's one big difference. Girish Ghosh had tremendous faith in him. Had tremendous faith in God, especially in Sri Ramakrishna. And the result was over time, the man was completely transformed. The people used to come to see him, that Bhakto Girish, he has become a devotee, a lover of God. Did he change his ways? He did. All of it dropped out, and he was completely transformed in the way he talked, thought, and the way he lived his life. Became a saintly person. There is the beautiful story of Angulimal, if you go back 2,500 years ago. I think every one of the incarnations does one of these miraculous things, takes hold of a lost case and transforms it so radically. So if you make a good person better, it's not much credit to you. You make a hopeless person, transform it into somebody who's saintly and a tremendously good person. That is miraculous. So Angulimala, who was this great, terrible dacoit, who frequented a dense forest, and he would kill people and collect their fingers and made a garland of it. And he would wear that garland. Now, the Buddha, on his way begging for food, he was going to cross that forest. People told him, don't go in there. The terrible Angulimala is there. Anguli means fingers. Mala means a garland. He's there. And if you chance upon him, he'll kill you. And the Buddha calmly walked inside. And of course, Angulimal saw this lone traveler. So he chased him. He came up, sneaked up behind him to kill him. But he couldn't catch up. So he started walking faster. Still couldn't catch up. Started running after this lone monk who was walking in the distance. And he couldn't narrow the gap between himself and that receding figure of that monk. Finally he gasped and he shouted, Bhikkhu, monk, stop. And the Buddha looked back at him and said, I stopped long ago, Angulimala. When will you stop? And just that transformed him completely. He burst into tears and fell at his feet and said, save me, my Lord. And then the Buddha asked him to perform penances. And if I'm not wrong, he actually became a monk afterwards. That's Angulimala, a story of Girish Ghosh. There is the story of Jogai and Madhai in the life story of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, many such stories. So people who are completely transformed by a divine presence. Then 31st verse, he says this. Next verse, he says, why should a person who's not good, why should we consider this person to be good and even saintly if that person just becomes devoted to God, sincerely devoted to God? Thirty-first. Kshipram bhavati dharmatma, Kshipram bhavati dharmatma, Shashvat shantim nigacchati, Shashvat shantim nigacchati, Kaunteya pratijanihi, Kaunteya pratijanihi, Name bhakta pranashyati, Name bhakta pranashyati. Very powerful verse. This person soon becomes righteous-minded and attains eternal peace. O son of Kunti, proclaim to the world that my devotee never perishes. This line, devotees, they imprint it on their minds. Name bhakta pranashyati. Pratijani kaunteya. Know it for certain. I proclaim to you, I promise to you, my devotee never perishes. My devotee never perishes. If you love God, even in the least, he, she, it, whatever it is, will love you back many, many times more. This is a matter of faith, you're just believing such things. Yes, and Krishna says, believe it. The next line, he says, believe it. I'm telling you, believe it. And he says, you can proclaim it with confidence. Now, Arjuna doubted, just like us. Look, I like you and I respect you, and you're saying this, but it's a little crazy. Just because someone is devoted to you, is going to be transformed, is going to become saintly, and you want me to have confidence in that's the power of bhakti, love for you, and that too very fast. That it won't take a long time, many lifetimes of spiritual practice, then that's no biggie. But just by love of God, you'll be transformed. It's a bit too much. And he's thinking, what will my friends, And the commentator says that you are a simple person, Krishna. After all, Krishna is a cowherd, so he doesn't know people in high society. What will people in Manhattan think? The jet set, if I say such silly stuff. The commentator says here in Sanskrit, I'll read it out and translate. Kutarka karkashavadino naitan manyeran iti shankya akulita chittam arjunam protsahyati. Says Arjuna is a little disturbed. He can't say it out loud, but he says, I might make an effort and believe what you are saying. I would like to believe it, but I know all of these, my cool friends, kutarka karkashavadina, who are sophisticated, who are full of skeptical arguments, and karkashavadi, that they'll have harsh and cutting comments to make, and they're not going to think this way and accept this. Naitan manniran iti. So to encourage him and to give him confidence, Krishna says, Pratijani, he know it for certain. I proclaim to you, Name bhakta pranashyati, my devotee never perishes. And here, Krishna says it so straightforward, so powerfully. Here the commentator, he magnifies it even further. He says, Hey Kaunteya, O son of Kunti, O Arjuna. He says, Maha Ghosha Purvakam, with drums, beating drums, make a tremendous announcement. On all social media platforms, you can go and make an announcement. Vivadamananam sabhaṃ gatva. Go to the gathering of people where they debate such things and say that God doesn't exist, poo-poo such things. Bahum utkshipya, raise both hands, nishankam, with no doubt, without a shred of doubt. Pratijanihi, pratigyam kuru, make a proclamation. What kind of proclamation? Me parameshwarasya bhakta sudurācāro api na pranashyati apitu kritartha eva bhavati iti. Those who are devoted to God, even if in your eyes, in the eyes of the people, they are no good. They're fallen, no good. Losers. He says, such a person will never perish. Not only that, apitu kritartha eva bhavati. They will attain fulfillment. They will become enlightened and realize God and be free. So, I'm reminded of the confidence of a Socrates who is drinking the hemlock. And people are weeping. And Socrates' last words, he says, don't weep for me. Weep for yourselves. I go to a greater, brighter world. And for you is this dark world to suffer. So that kind of confidence, he says, they will never come to a bad end. And not only that, they will attain the highest. They will attain God realization. Tell all those cool people. You don't have to avoid them. You don't have to feel shy about it. Proclaim it with the greatest confidence. So, and then he says, what will happen? Tataśchateya. And then what will happen to them? Tvat praudi vijrimbha vidvamsita kutarka nishamshayam tvameva gurutvena ashrayaran. So their skeptical arguments swept away by this tremendous glowing confidence of yours. They will accept you as their teacher, as a spiritual teacher. They'll be converted to your way of thinking. And this has happened again and again in the history of, in so many places. I was thinking, when I was reading these lines, I was thinking of two examples which came to my mind immediately. More than 1,000 years ago, Ramanujacharya, the great teacher of bhakti, of devotion, in the south of India, he was already well known as a teacher of bhakti. Now, this great scholar, Yagyamurti, he came to debate with Ramanujacharya. So he was named to reckon with. People used to be scared of him because he was so learned and he could defeat anybody just like that. And so when he would come with with a convoy of, in those days, bullock carts. With all the bullock carts had all his books. Nowadays you could put it in a flash drive, or it might be in a cloud. But in those days, it makes a much more intimidating sight if you're followed by a convoy of bullock carts, which raises the dust in the sky. You can see the dust coming from long distance, and people say, "Run for your lives! Yagyamurti is coming. He's going to challenge you for a debate." So this challenger came and challenged Ramanujacharya that you are spreading this doctrine of bhakti, but he was talking about non-dualism and Advaita, and so he challenged him to a debate. And Ramanuja accepted the challenge, and there was a big debate. But the challenger was so learned and so intimidating in his debating that Ramanuja began to lose the debate. And then on the last day, when the decision was about to be taken, who has won the debate, Ramanuja knew that he had lost the debate. He prayed to Lord Srinivasa, in Srirangapuram. So he prayed to Vishnu, and that I was just spreading your bhakti, devotion to God. Now, if it is your will that I will lose this and my mission will fail, then I surrender to you. But this is all I wanted. I don't want to win debates or lose debates, and it's nothing to me. So next day he was sitting, and the challenger came in full confidence. But as he approached Ramanujacharya, he began to lose his confidence. And by the time he came near Ramanujacharya, he fell flat in Sashtanga, in the pranam, the salutation to Ramanujacharya. He fell flat on the ground and saluted Ramanujacharya. With tears in his eyes, he said, "Please forgive me. What foolishness I have been doing to challenge you." He actually had a vision of the Lord behind Ramanujacharya. So so every hair on his body stood on the end, and said, "Here is this man who has realized God, who has God in his heart, and what foolishness am I spending time and challenging him?" So he became a very great follower of Ramanujacharya, one of the most learned members of his group. That is one. The other example was Vasudeva Sarvabhauma, who Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, so when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was teaching the doctrine of bhakti, and he went from Navadvip in Bengal to Puri, Jagannath Puri in Orissa, at that time Vasudeva Sarvabhauma was there, a very great scholar, devotional also, but a great scholar of Vedanta. And he heard that a young monk has come who sheds tears at the name of Krishna and sings and dances and goes into samadhi. So Vasudeva Sarvabhauma went. Actually, he knew Chaitanya Mahaprabhu from Navadvip. He found that he has become a monk. Oh, I know this lad. He has become a monk, and clearly a very pure soul. But what is this silliness in taking the name of Krishna, singing and dancing? He is a fit candidate for non-dual knowledge. He said, "Will you come and stay with me? I will teach you Vedanta." Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his simplicity said, "Yes, all right, I'll stay with you." So he went with Vasudeva Sarvabhauma, and every day there used to be Vedanta classes, daily. And Vasudeva Sarvabhauma would expound the Brahma Sutras with Shankara's commentary, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sat quietly, did not react, did not say yes, no, nothing, no questions, quietly. After a few days, Vasudeva Sarvabhauma was very upset. He said that, "Look, I've been teaching you all this time. No reaction. Like, are you dumb or what? Are you getting what I'm saying? Do you understand it? Do you do not understand it? Do you agree? Do you not agree?" And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, with great humility, he said, "I understand what the text says. I don't understand your explanation one bit." And Vasudeva Sarvabhauma was furious. He started a debate with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu about the interpretation of the Vedanta Sutras. But anyway, to cut a long story short, what happened at the end was, he, not defeating Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in debate, he had the vision of Narayana, the combined form of Rama and Krishna in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And having that vision, he fell down unconscious, and when he came to his senses, with folded hands and tears flowing from his eyes, he fell at the feet of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and asked for his forgiveness and became a convert to bhakti, the path of devotion. So this is what Krishna is saying. Proclaim it with full confidence. Don't worry about your logic and arguments and sounding cool, or doesn't matter. With full confidence you proclaim it, I am with you. You will see all of that will be swept away. I remember an incident. Sri Ramakrishna is talking about bhakti, devotion to God, and there was a pandit, a scholar in that group, who was making some cutting remarks, and was trying to be funny. Then suddenly Sri Ramakrishna turned to him and said, what kind of a pandit are you? Do you not know in how many janmas, how many lifetimes of punya, of good merit, of lifetimes of merit, good karma, one gets a little devotion to God. And you are trying to, being skeptical and trying to prove that God doesn't exist. You're trying to destroy that little devotion that these people have. What kind of a pandit are you? And the pandit was so ashamed that it's recorded. He was so ashamed, he got up and in shame he ran away from that place. So yes, this is what Krishna is talking about. We will wrap it up here unless somebody has a question or a comment. Yes.
So the practices mentioned in verse 26 and the sannyasa.
26, 27.
Yeah, and sannyasa yoga yuktatma.
Yes, that is sannyasa yoga yuktatma, the 27th one, where all activities are given to God, Ishvara.
So it sounds similar to karma phalatyaga.
Yes, karma phalatyaga. Offer everything to God. In 12th chapter again, 5-step practice will be given. First one, second one, like that, 5 levels, each easier than the earlier one, where all these will be included also. But yes, karma phalatyaga, offering the results of the action to God. Here he says even offering the action itself to God. Whatever you are doing, we are doing to God, for God. Yes.
What is the difference in the attitude of somebody who's on the path of karma or karma yoga versus somebody who's on the path of devotion or bhakti? And do they, of course both of them eventually sort of may lead to self-realization, but do they eventually get to the same path or is it different?
I don't know if they come to the same path, but they come to the same realization. Swami Vivekananda is very clear about it. He says the goal is that each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest this divinity already within us. And you do it by work, karma yoga, by love, bhakti yoga, by psychic control, meditation, raja yoga, by philosophy, he says. He uses the word philosophy. So he means jnana yoga. By one or more or all of these and be free. That is the whole of religion. Books, temples, doctrines, churches are secondary details. So this is a very broad picture. Now when you come to the actual, the schools, the darshanas, Advaita Vada, Vishishta Advaita, Dvaita, there are particular hierarchical arrangements. So if you ask an Advaitin your question, the answer would be that no, it doesn't work that way. Karma yoga, there's no path of karma yoga, no path of bhakti yoga. Karma yoga is preliminary for everybody. With karma yoga, one gets purification of mind. And then through bhakti and meditation, one gets focus. Bhakti yoga and Raja yoga together can be called upasana. One gets focus of mind, ekagrata, chitta ekagrata. With a focused and pure mind, you come to the practices of non-dualism, of jnana, shravana, manana, nididhyasana, that generates the knowledge which removes the ignorance. You realize you are Brahman. So this is the process. But notice how the yogas have been arranged hierarchically. First karma yoga, preliminary, basic. Will it lead to the same realization? No, it won't. It's like saying, I want to go to Mumbai. So how do you get to Mumbai? Well, first you take a cab from here to JFK and you take a plane from JFK to Mumbai. Now, if you say, no, tell me, does the path of the cab and the path of the plane from JFK, do they both take you to the same goal? Yes, they do, but they are not independent paths. It's not an option. You have to do both. You can't say, tell me one. You have to do both. That is the hierarchy of the yogas, which is established. So you should then, why not say that? Why just say 4 yogas? The reason is, if you follow that hierarchy, it will work. It will take you to enlightenment. But that's just one paradigm. But if you go to Vishishtadvaita, Dvaita, Shuddhadvaita, or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Achintya Bheda Ved, all those paths, there they will reverse it. For them also Karma Yoga is preliminary. It purifies the mind. But Jnana Yoga is next and Bhakti Yoga is highest. Why would that be? Because their metaphysics are different. So by Jnana Yoga, with Karma Yoga, you purify your mind. By Jnana Yoga, you realize you are not the body, not the mind. You are consciousness, pure consciousness. You are Atma. Now by Bhakti Yoga, you connect your Atma to Paramatma. Because you are part of Paramatma. You are not identical. So devotion must be the final practice. If you come to the Vaishnava Vedanta paradigm, the Gaudiya Vaishnava, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's paradigm, if you go there, he'll say even all those Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, not necessary. Just Bhakti itself will take you from the beginning to the end. Pure devotion. Not mixed with knowledge or anything like that. So these are different paradigms. Now if you want to be inclusive about all of them, what's the broad picture? Spiritual practices take you to God. And all spiritual practices, Vivekananda sort of broadly classified under the knowledge practices, the meditative practices, devotional practices, and action. Psychologically also it makes sense. The modern psychology will tell you we have these 4 capacities. One is the cognitive dimension, knowledge, understanding. The other one is the affective dimension, feeling, heart. And then the third one is the cognitive dimension, the willpower, the ability to do things. And the last one is focus, which is so important. Now notice, these 4, they correspond to the 4 yogas. Cognitive dimension of our ability to think and understand, Jnana Yoga. Affective dimension, the ability to feel, Bhakti Yoga. The cognitive dimension, the ability to work, willpower, Karma Yoga. And focus, the meditation, Raja Yoga. So it's a sort of broad picture. Now there is more to be understood about this. When your question was, will somebody on the path of Karma Yoga attain to the same realization as the path of Bhakti Yoga? So what I said so far, in the traditional schools, if you go and ask such a question, they will say there is no path of Karma Yoga as such. It will dovetail into the other paths. Your path of Karma Yoga will lead you to Bhakti. And in fact, it's not that you start off with Karma Yoga for 20 years and then Bhakti Yoga for 10 years and then Jnana Yoga for 5 years. No, all of them must go together. One must be devotional, one must serve, one must meditate regularly and inquire. This is a sort of integral path of Vedanta. But Vivekananda, he gave special emphasis on karma. And he says, even by action. But his action, the Karma Yoga, if you read, that is basically, it contains the essence of Jnana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga already. So he says, even by the path of action, one can attain enlightenment. But what he means by action, you will see, basically it comes out as Vedanta, Advaita or Bhakti, both can be done. Yeah, I'm sorry to leave it at that. There's a lot to be said about this, very interesting. And then he talks about the harmony of 4 yogas. He says any one of them will take you to enlightenment, or more than one will take you to enlightenment, but he recommends a harmony, a combination of all 4. People might think that's something unique to Vivekananda, but actually it isn't. All the traditional acharyas, if you look at the teachings of Shankara, Ramanuja, in fact in Sanatana Dharma generally, meditation, devotion, Vedanta Vichara, and puja, seva, karma, all of them are always, these ingredients are always there, but the combination may be different. The hierarchy may be different in different practices. But somebody else had raised their hand. I'll come to you next. The gentleman here.
Good evening, Swami.
And then next.
Sorry, someone else?
Yes, you first. You.
Okay, good evening, Swami. One recurring theme from last week and also from today is breaking the cycle of karma.
Yes.
And this is largely through devotion, and you also mentioned the spiritual and ritualistic. I feel like this addresses the how, but not the why. I mean, why should we even break the cycle of karma?
Yes.
What incentive is there to break the cycle of karma?
Because of suffering, because we are trapped here. Cycle of karma means causality, cause and effect. So I have generated some causes and this has given me this life here. And it is not fulfilling. And said, yeah, the law of karma would say, you want it to be more fulfilling? Well, do more good, generate better causes, you will get better results next time. So that is the philosophy of the Purva Mimamsa, the earlier portion of the Vedas. They say, this is what you can do in life. And most people try to live like, the idea would be a better life, little better than what I have or got. But spirituality is much more radical in all spiritual traditions, and Vedanta especially. You should, at no point will you reach a final resolution. You will keep coming back into suffering again and again and again. And nothing ever will be fully satisfying or fulfilling. That's why you must, a mature seeker will finally seek to go beyond this limited existence. You had a follow on, yeah?
Yeah. Sorry, you said that.
Yes.
And you mentioned suffering, or
Yeah.
perceived suffering.
Suffering or dissatisfactory, because some people say, we are not suffering, especially a lot of people in Manhattan are not really suffering very terribly. But perceived suffering or dissatisfaction, yes.
I think back to last week when you mentioned another Swamiji within the order who was almost fully paralyzed. You
Yes.
described this person as one of the most contented, satisfied people you'd ever met.
Right, right.
I mean, I don't think suffering itself is the reason to break the cycle. I mean, it is just perceived suffering at the end of the day.
Yes, and to go beyond that, to see that this suffering is a broken body, is at the level of the body, and I am not the body, not the mind. That's why he did not see it as suffering at all. So what will happen? What happens at the level of the world, at the level of the body, that will continue to happen. That will not change because suddenly I've become, I've found religion. The body will continue to be the body. The world will continue to be the world. And if I do not either, get self-realization or God-realization, I will suffer. To come to that level of that Swami, you need spirituality. Yeah. There are just two ways of going beyond karma. One is to get hold of something which is beyond karma itself. What is that? There's the Lord of karma, Ishvara, God, Bhagavan. God is beyond causality. Causality is basically the power of God. It's part of Maya, the power of God. So catch hold of God. By the grace of God, you go beyond karma. That is the devotee's way. Or you realize yourself to be beyond karma. That is the self-realization way. I am Atman, I am Brahman. And suddenly you see, it's all right. I'm perfectly all right. So these are the only two ways. I'll come to you. Yes.
So each week we're learning about how spiritual practices how we should live our life through spiritual practice. How should we think about guilt when we're not able to do it consistently?
Yes. I'm glad you raised this topic. Actually, these two verses, they mean us. When we talk about even an evil person is transformed into a saint, we talk about Angulimala, at least we think that, it's about Angulimala. I'm not a serial killer, so he's not talking about me. Yes, we are not serial killers. That's true. Very good. But we, all of us, we have guilt. It's a very good question. And that burdens us. That forms a barrier between us and God. How do you do about that? That's why repentance, priyaḥ in Sanskrit, is an important part of the beginning of spiritual life. In Christianity, there is confession. In Hinduism, there is priyaḥ. That is, how would you translate that? Priyaḥ means repentance. Redemption, repentance. Yes. So we have built up, we have set into motion such powerful forces in past lives. You believe it or not, but we have had many lives, and so, what was I in a past life? Don't bother to find out. You want to get a glimpse of what I was in the past life? Look at our own lives now. This is the result of what we were in the past. How do we break out of it? And we need help there. That's why many of the spiritual practices, meditation techniques, the fantastic insights of non-duality, that you are the witness consciousness and all of that, they're so powerful. But at the end of the day, they don't seem to do much for us. Not their fault, it's our fault. We carry a burden. Vivekananda says, We come trailing clouds of glory, says the poet, but not all of us come trailing clouds of glory. Many of us come trailing clouds of black smoke. And in this life, we have a burden of guilt. So here Krishna gives the solution to that. He is actually speaking to us. And he says, one powerful way of transcending this and transforming this burden of guilt is devotion to God. Don't keep your mind on, I'm miserable, I've done this or that, I am a sinner. Keep that mind on God. It's so powerful, so purifying, that the Lord will show a way out for us. So we don't have to pay for what we did. And the Holy Mother says that where a person would have been pierced by a spear, where would have lost a leg, you get a pinprick. Because of this armor of God, of devotion to God. And the goal is no longer that I will escape punishment by being devoted to God. The love of God is so deep and so burning and so all-consuming. If the Lord wants me to be punished for it, I'm fine with it. Ramanuja's guru, Yamunacharya, this is what a beautiful hymn. He prays to the Lord Vishnu, to God. He says, I stand before you, so fallen, such a sinner I am, that I do not dare to ask for forgiveness. Do with me what you will. Now, he's a saint. I mean, what sinner is he? Nothing. He has not done anything. But that's the attitude. So anyway, the answer to your question is, this is the answer to your question. That's what Krishna is actually giving the answer to this question, which we all should have. What do we do with guilt in our lives? You offer it to the Lord and love God. Love God as much as you can, and that will, you'll see in time, we are cleansed of that. Direct disciples, Swami Shivananda, Brahmananda, and all, their answer to this question of feeling of repentance, of guilt, of sorrow, is that don't do it again, and say sorry to God, to ask for forgiveness from God, and don't do it again. If you feel that's not enough, then they would give some practice. We often don't feel it's enough. We feel we need to suffer. In God's eyes, it's all right. We're children. But we need to stop doing it and need to change our lives. That is very important. There's a song, Bengali song, which says that you, my Lord, are all forgiving. You forgive everything except that which demeans your forgiveness. Khumibe na tumi khamahinota. That which demeans your forgiveness, and the Christian doctrine of you must also forgive others. That's also very, very, very powerful. If I am unforgiving, God also will be unforgiving to me. And if I devalue God's forgiveness, that I again go back to repeating the same thing again, then that is not that should not happen. God's forgiveness is very valuable, very valuable. Quickly, we have run out of time. You and lady there, yes, and you had your hand up. Did you have a question? Let's quickly hear the questions and see if I can address them.
Swamiji Pranam, you were speaking about the sadhaka and in the context of Shuba and Ashuba.
Yes.
Is this somehow related to what Thakur said about avidya maya and vidya maya?
Yes, but then you have to reconfigure that Shubha and Ashubha, auspicious, inauspicious, in terms of Vidya Maya and Avidya Maya. Avidya Maya is that which leads us into samsara. Vidya Maya is that which leads us beyond samsara. Both are Maya. Just as one is the garland, another one is the snake. But actually the rope is the reality. Yes.
The people on 4 different levels that you mentioned, is it proper to interpret if somebody on the 2nd level is doing good action, and that same action is done by somebody on the 3rd level, the 2nd one is bound by the golden chains, but the 3rd is not?
Yes.
Because of the motivation of that action?
Yes. The same action externally, that's what Krishna says. But internally, that person at the 3rd level is internally offering it to God. Yes, I am bound to hold a job. I'm bound to, so I have these kids, I'm bound to raise them. I have this responsibility in life, I'm bound to do that. Good. This is an opportunity for me to practice spiritual disciplines. So I am doing the same thing which my neighbor is doing, but the neighbor is doing it because he's on that second level, a responsible citizen, a good person, is doing that so that his life is good, his or her life is good. I am doing it for the love of God. Internally. There's no difference externally. And try to keep it as hidden as possible internally. So the more we express it outside, the more force it loses. Yes. Lady there.
So this whole going beyond the causality of karma is only if you realize that you are the Atman. Right? Even then, prayer or devotion or spiritual practices does not affect the karma of the body.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't.
It can reduce.
It can reduce.
It can affect in many different ways. If a spiritual seeker is generally a good person, so you're consistently doing good things. When you consistently do good things, many things happen. One is the grace of God is with you then. Second, our past karma is a whole storehouse. There's a good and bad. But generally, if you keep on doing the good, it's the good part of it which gets activated. You get the results of that. More good that we do, even the bad karma which gives results of unpleasantness, we are not affected by that so much. Because we are not looking for worldly gains, or we're not very upset with worldly losses also. Is that what you're asking?
Even realized souls, they like Ramana Maharshi, Sri Ramakrishna, they had, he suffered cancer. Or
Yes, yes.
Like so the karma of the body does not seem to.
No, the world will continue as it is. There's that beautiful story about the Buddha. The monk asked the Buddha that, what good has your teaching done? Because you said suffering is old age, disease, death, but you are becoming old. You're getting disease and probably you'll die. Many of us who are following your teachings, we are getting old. Some of us have died, we are getting disease also. Then the Buddha's answer, very simple, but it shows us what is the meaning of spirituality. What does spirituality do? If you say that the goal is to remove suffering, but suffering is continuing because you define suffering as old age, disease, death. Old age, disease, death are coming to enlighten people also. Then the Buddha's answer was, suffering is like being hit by two arrows. One arrow is what the world throws at you. Old age, disease, death, how people treat you, and all sorts of troubles in this world. The second arrow is your reaction to it. And most of our suffering is caused by our reaction to it. Almost all of it. The first arrow, you have to deal with what the world throws at you. You have to deal with it through worldly means. Stomachache is there, take a medicine. There's somebody, a burglar in your room, call 911. So that's a worldly way of dealing with it. It will never solve the problem entirely. There's the first arrow. But the second arrow, there spirituality works. Devotion, knowledge, meditation, these completely change our reaction to the world. And our real suffering is in the reaction. That person, he mentioned last week's example of the Swami who was paralyzed in both legs, was blind, so joyful that the second arrow doesn't bother him anymore. That's what spirituality does. If you notice, Sri Ramakrishna's body passed away due to throat cancer. Ramana Maharshi had a tumor. And that's the way they died. But throughout their lives also, little problems, ups and downs kept coming. If you read the lives of the saints, they seem to have more trouble than ordinary people. But they are always joyous. One common thing about Sri Ramakrishna, Ramana Maharshi, are all the saints of all the religious traditions you will read, they don't complain. They don't feel that they have anything to complain about. We feel we have lots to complain about.
Just a small follow-up. There are people who do all sorts of crazy bad stuff and they're not at all, they don't feel guilty, they don't feel anything, they just...
That's the first level, Pamara.
So they don't suffer in that way.
The second arrow, but you wait.
I have a question about moksha. How is it, or is it different than bliss or ananda? And if you have the intention of moksha, is that creating attachment?
No. Is it different from bliss or ananda? Moksha is different from bliss or ananda. From an Advaitic perspective, no. Your nature is ananda and your nature is moksha. According to Advaita Vedanta, you are already moksha swarupa. Your very nature as Brahman is always free. So moksha is always attained. Advaita Vedanta is strange in that way. What do you get by Advaita Vedanta? What you have always got. What can you get rid by Advaita Vedanta? What was never there. Praptasya prapti, nivrittasya nivritti in Advaita Vedanta. Advaita says you'll get rid of samsara when you become enlightened. But the samsara was never there, Jagat Mithya. And you will realize you are Brahman, but you always were Brahman, whether you realize it or not. That's what the Advaita does. Question?
Swami, in chapter 5, Bhagavan says, Sarva karmani manasa sanyasyaste sukham vasi. Then he goes on to say, Navadvare puredehi naiva kurvan nakaram.
Yes.
Right? So the naiva kurvan nakaram, is that the ultimate goal of like karma yoga?
Yes. Here there it says, in this body with 9 gates, city with 9 gates. What's the city with 9 gates? God resides in the city with 9 gates. What's that city? That's the body. And God resides, Atman resides, pure consciousness there, neither doing nor causing to be done. That's our real nature as a witness consciousness. It's only when we see ourselves as this I, this ego, immediately feel, I am the one who does things. I am the one who's enjoying or suffering, or I want to enjoy and I do not want to suffer. I. That's at the center. Sri Ramakrishna identifies this I as ignorance. So when we step back from this apparent I into our real nature, which is that neither doer, nor causing to be done, is the witness consciousness. See, all the terrible things that go on in a horror movie, can you blame the screen for it? Why were you so horrible? Screen says, no, I'm the same. If it's a comedy, I'm the same. If it's a tragedy, I'm the same. If it's a horror movie or a science fiction movie, I'm the same. If there's no movie, I'm the same. That existence consciousness place, that's what we are. Already. We're already that. That's what is being pointed out. So on that very high note, let's wrap it up today. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.